Hello everybody, welcome back to the WTF1 podcast, 70th anniversary Grand Prix edition. Now I have something to tell you. I have a confession. This is pre-recorded. I am not part of the WTF1 podcast this week. I know, shock horror, how dare I not be on the podcast, but I will be back for Spain next week. Do not worry about that. And I'm leaving you in the very capable hands of Tommy, the founder of WTF1 and Tommo F1, new time, big shot F1 YouTuber on the scene. So boys, take it away. I'm very sad I'm not going to be part of this podcast, and I'm sure I'll watch it back and want to disagree with you on everything. Goodbye.
Hey everyone, Tommy here. Yeah, you know 2020's gone horribly wrong when I'm presenting, but here we are. How are you doing, Tommo?
Thank you for having me, mate. Obviously, last minute kind of substituting. I'm essentially Nico Hulkenberg today. So it's a pleasure to be here, mate. How are you doing?
I'm good. It's even more last minute than Nico Hulkenberg because genuinely it's, 20 minutes before we were meant to record this, and Matt couldn't make it, so this should be an interesting podcast. Hopefully it's a good one.
I will do my best to do as good a job as Nico's done in the Racing Point.
Good stuff. So, 3-word race reviews. Now, this is the part where I put in awful names for Matt to read out, but I've absolutely done myself in here. So, same pick of Russell until first point said, remember to drink. David G _209, everyone jinxed Hulkenberg. Field.Gamilla, finally not Mercedes, and Key.it, full send Verstappen. So, bit of a funny race, really. I obviously enjoyed it with a Verstappen victory, and I'm sure a lot of other fans enjoyed the fact that Mercedes weren't winning. I thought it was interesting, though, that maybe the race wasn't an absolute banger of a race, but it's kind of got to that stage now where any race where Mercedes doesn't win is considered a good one. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I think there wasn't a huge amount of wheel-to-wheel action throughout, but it had an appeal on a different level in terms of the tyre strategy and all that. So, yeah, I know what you mean. It wasn't like, I mean, there were times I actually missed the Ricciardo spin, which we'll get onto that later, I'm sure, and like, because there were parts of the race where, again, it was just a bit, switched off, but you always knew that it was almost like the anticipation waiting for something to go wrong with the Mercedes, with the tyres, because we know that historically they don't do well in the heat. So almost it was that anticipation that kept the excitement levels higher than last week, I think, for example.
Verstappen, you're so used to Mercedes winning that just having anyone in front, there's always that doubt in your mind that, Mercedes still will win somehow. Whereas roles reverse, if Verstappen was a Mercedes, I think we'd have all gone, well, he's got this in the bag. His other rivals' tyres are ruined, but there we go. So we're going to dive into Matt's review, and he's recorded a little message for him to do his review.
Cutie.
Right, my 3-word race review, make tyres degrade. My goodness me. That 2-stop strategy was amazing to watch. Verstappen and Red Bull just kind of forcing their hand and just going the opposite way to Mercedes no matter what they did. Hard tyres in qualifying, which was a great shout it turned out to be. Had only a handful of laps on the mediums, and it was the perfect strategy. Verstappen drove incredibly well as well. And, Ross Brawn knows that this needs to happen, so I wouldn't be surprised if the Pirelli tyre choices as we go through the season, obviously the ones that haven't already been chosen, we do go more down the degrading route, because it provided amazing racing, mainly because Mercedes couldn't handle the hot temperatures and the soft rubber. But either way, just make the tyres degrade. That's exactly what I want. Give it to us. And I'm not going to keep blabbing on because it's not my podcast this week. I'm not hosting it. Guys, I'm sorry I miss you, okay? Tommo and Tommy, take it back. Take it away, please.
So, make tyres degrade. Yay or nay, Tommo?
I mean, you can see why he's said it. Obviously, like, it makes a lot of sense. We don't want to be in a position, because we have had the opposite extreme in the past in Formula 1, and then it's just tyre management the entire race, which we don't want. But obviously, yeah, it does mix things up a bit. And to be fair, I think it's more because Mercedes particularly struggle with it. I think that's why we're more drawn towards it. So I don't think I'm quite as on board as maybe Matty is, because I don't know if that actually, if you put that across the whole grid, it would. But it does add a bit of unpredictability, and I'm all for that. It adds more pit stops, which then adds more chances of, teams, the strategy coming into play and losing time in the pits and messing pits up. So I'm all for that side of things. So overall, I would say I agree, but yeah, with a bit of caution, I think.
My 3-word race review until Matty pretty much stole it, being about the tyres, because I was going to go something similar in terms of like tyres are key, because similar to you, I feel that maybe it's not the fact that they need to degrade and be useless. It's more the fact that I think 2010 and 2011, now people are probably already typing going, well, what a great season we had in 2010, and then 2011 Vettel walked it. But in terms of pure entertainment, and then obviously if you look at 2012, the year after, all the different winners, crazy races. And for me, they do all this stuff where they've tried to implement DRS, they've changed the era of the cars, they obviously recently took out the front wing end plates to try and make the racing closer. And this race just showed that for more unpredictability, it really is tyres are key. And you can see that was the case in between 2010 and 2011. The racing entertainment just went up through the roof. Because Ethan Catton has said, should Pirelli always bring compounds that are one step softer than normal? I mean, it's one of those things where is it about the softness of the tyre, or is it just the unpredictability of the tyre?
Because the blistering's directly tied to the heat, right? Like, as far as I'm aware. So like that, you're not going to get that every single race, obviously, that level of heat. But obviously, particularly as where we're with the delayed season now, going to Spain next weekend, which, I mean, typically Spain this time of the year is boiling. So again, great.
Barcelona, middle of August is going to be hot. You can't imagine anything else but kind of 40 degrees, surely. It's
gonna be wild, man. I'm very much looking forward to Mercedes struggling again.
Oh, of course, it's nothing about picking back Mercedes, but we all like to see it. Let's be honest. We've had so long of Mercedes dominating.
Yeah,
it's nice to see. It's nice to see kind of. I made a joke on my Twitter that one tiny inconvenience and F1 fans are cheering, but can you really blame us? Like, we're a lot of neutrals don't necessarily think the right thing is to peg Mercedes back, because at the end of the day they've earned where they are. But it doesn't mean that it's not disappointing for fans that you tune in. Everyone that's going to know whoever's. It's a race between two cars. So, Aria Juska says, because today's race is exciting to the drivers, fans, and everyone else, should Pirelli do this every week to create a two-stop strategy? I think this is maybe more on point. I think you briefly mentioned it earlier, that maybe it's not necessarily about degrading, it's about more pit stops, and how we do that. It doesn't necessarily need to be that the tyres need to shred apart.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, one-stop races are not as exciting.
No, no, definitely not.
And for whatever reason, I mean, I think the reason was, correct me if I'm wrong, 2013 you had the Pirelli tyre failures in the British Grand Prix.
Yep.
And that almost hit a point where everyone said this tyre degrading business is just ridiculous now. We need to go back to drivers pushing. The drivers obviously were very vocal about the fact that they couldn't drive flat out Formula One cars every race. So that kind of put a little bit of pressure on Pirelli. And then you also have to think of them as a brand as well, that when they're putting themselves into Formula One, despite they were asked to do this, by the way, that they were asked to make tyres degrade. That was their job. But from a business point of view, they're joining Formula One as an official tyre partner and seeing seeing Lewis Hamilton cross the line on three wheels. Is that a good advert for Pirelli?
It's not great for their brand image, is it? That's the thing. Because Matty was talking about this in terms of the idea of like mandatory couple of pit stops, and I think like, why not? Because again, regardless of all this talk about it, blistering and tyre deg and all that, like if you've got mandatory pit stops, then that will inherently allow the drivers to push more because they have to pit those two times. So it just, and like we said about the whole strategy side of things and the chance of mechanics, messing up and people getting jumps in the pit lane, like there's, whenever you see like a tight race and whoever's at the lead or whoever's in that battle comes into the pits, there's always you always know in the back of your mind, like the mechanics, like, they might cock this up. Like there's a chance and they could get jumped in the pit. And, that happens. What was it? The one I always remember is, was it Max? Was it last year at Monaco? I remember that wrong. And he just got the jump. I can't remember on who
on Bottas when they had the little collision in the pit lane.
Yeah. And he got, and that actually like worked out. And that again, that's another bit of like jeopardy to add to the equation. And so I'm all for it because look, it's an entertainment spectacle. And still with 2 pit stops, you can still, again, extract as much as you can out of those tyres. It just adds more strategy because that's what makes Formula One unique. It's such a unique series in terms that it's not a spec series. There's all this other world to Formula One beyond just the drivers, and adding more pits and all that good stuff. I think it's a great idea. I really do.
So hear me out here. I'm convinced we have the perfect solution to this. That you can argue my case when I say it. I cannot see any negatives. And I think it could be implemented really quick as well. So Karun Chandok has said this in the past, and I totally agree with him. So you have the 3 compounds, and obviously they do 3 hours of practice, and pretty much all the time they dismiss the softest tire or whatever and go, this is absolutely rubbish, we're not using it. However, if you make the teams have to use all 3 compounds of tire in a race, you're guaranteeing 2 stops. Drivers can push because, they have to make 2 stops anyway, so they don't have to think about tyre saving as much.
Yeah.
Pirelli then don't have to resort to making awful tyres, which is bad for their image. And then all they need to do is make sure, which they kind of do anyway, that there's a difference between the 2 compounds, like a big enough gap. So if you think that, and then onto my next point, is if they ditch the Q2 tyre rule, you then have everyone on using any tyre they want. And then if you think about it like that, imagine Mercedes have locked out the front row. Yeah. Do they put softs on to try and pull away and build a gap? Yeah. Do they put hards on, but then Verstappen's behind on, and he goes softer tyres because he wants to be aggressive and push them? I don't think, and a reason the race was good was because Verstappen was on a different tyre compound.
Yeah.
And I really just, that is my pet hate in F1. If it's one rule, it's that Q2 tyre rule. Because if you get rid of that, people will gamble. Yeah. Everyone starts on the same tyre. And it's a one-stop, of course everyone's going to pit on the same lap because they're all in the same conditions. Whereas if you add an extra variable of another tyre, allow them to pick whatever they want, you might get Max Verstappen going, well, I've qualified 7th, but because he's an overtaker, he's like, well, I'm going to stick on the softs and go absolutely ham for the first 10 laps and try and overtake everyone, get that tyre out of the way, stick the hards on, and then everyone's stopping at different times. I mean, for me, that's it. That is the key. That's it.
I know, and I think as well, like things beyond that is that it is, again, getting rid of that stupid Q2 rule. It's like it gives a truly level playing field. So if anything, it levels up because again, anyone can use any tyre at the start. But also, and with all these AWS insights and all that nonsense, like F1 are trying to make the sport easier to understand for someone coming in. And when someone comes in and you've got to try and explain, well, they can't use these tyres, but they can, like, bruv, just no. Yeah. It's just much simpler for anyone to just understand. Right, anyone can start on any tyre they like, and you're right, and it mix things up. And we knew in qualifying that Max was going for a different strategy after he put. I mean, because he only didn't he. I swear, one of the quali sessions yesterday, he only just squeezed through. Was it Q2? He was like 9th, I think. I could be wrong. No,
I have to admit I missed qualifying for the first time in about 4 years, so you won't be able to quote me on that one. But
Max did squeeze through.
I'd assume that would be when he was on the hards. With the hard gamble to get through. But for me, I do not understand any benefit to that tyre at all, because the only I feel like maybe in 2011, when the tyres were so bad, them doing even 3 runs, an in-lap, fast lap and an out-lap, would maybe destroy the tyre enough that they would be on struggling tyres rather than fresh new rubber. Maybe that was the thinking behind it. I can't quite remember, but it's an awful rule and we need to get rid of it, personally.
Agreed.
Cool. Now, my 3-word race review. This is kind of bad because you're so last minute, like we're saying with Hulkenberg. You don't actually have a 3-word race review, but you can have one.
I've got one up here. So
all right, nice. So mine is Max says no, and this. Now Matt gave me permission to fanboy here because I was going to do the tyres one as well, but I just think Max Verstappen's radio, whether you love him or hate him, and don't get me wrong, I can see why people don't like him and don't like his approach to Formula One, but we want to see racing drivers race, and there's nothing I hate more than a race engineer coming on the team radio and saying, don't race. So the fact that Max Verstappen said, I'm the one driving the car, I'm the one that knows how good my tyres are, let me push them, and I don't know if this is right or wrong. You can give your input on this, but I don't necessarily think the fact that Verstappen pushed them so hard won him the race because the Mercedes tyres were pretty dreadful anyway. However, if he'd have just sat back and gone, all right then, Mercedes might have eked out their tyres for an extra few laps and then they wouldn't have been on the hards for as long. You never know. So the fact that Verstappen took it into his own hands and said, I'm never getting to race a Mercedes, because we've mentioned on this podcast many times that he has been in no man's land a lot of the year because he can't quite, so far ahead of the midfield, can't quite reach Mercedes. But yeah, just an awesome team radio, which I think people love to see. They love to see the drivers making the choices, right?
Absolutely. I think the thing is Max gave Mercedes something to think about, and they couldn't, Mercedes, in an alternative universe where Max isn't on the grid, Mercedes can play it super conservative and still have the pace to draw out and win the race, and arguably could have, if Max wasn't there, maybe Mercedes could have done a different strategy which would have actually resulted them in having a faster race time. But knowing that Max was there and trying to that's why I'm so grateful that Max, because I like Max. I love the Dutch fan base probably more than Max, to be honest. But he brings so much, he's got so much pace, and he's getting everything out of that Red Bull, and he's pushing. He like we're saying, when I told Matty yesterday, I was like, by the way, Max is P2 in the Drivers' Championship, and he didn't believe it. It was like, no chance, no way. And I showed it on, and so he's ahead of Valtteri by 5 points, I think. And you wouldn't, when you think about the Mercedes dominance of this season, you just wouldn't jump to that assumption. But actually, Max is keeping them on it, and we're all for that. Obviously, you as a Max fan, first and foremost, but also look, no one. When we talk about Mercedes wanting to see them struggle, it's not wanting to see them struggle. It's just wanting to see a more even kill. If it was Ferrari, if it was Racing Point, if it was Williams at the top, we'd be saying the same thing, because no sport, you never want to see a absolute domination. You're seeing a lot of football leagues, Bundesliga is always getting dominated by Bayern Munich. It's it gets a bit boring. When it's a more competitive environment, everyone enjoys the spectacle a lot more, and that's just what we want to see, man.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, there may be a lot of new fans listening to this that wasn't around, but as I'm an old person, I've kind of watched through the Schumi era and the Vettel era. Obviously, the Schumi era didn't have social media like we do now, but even just me talking between family and friends that watched F1, it was kind of like, oh, which Ferrari's going to win this week? It was just a bit of a joke, no one can beat them. And Vettel, ironically, had the same kind of hate Lewis Hamilton was getting now, because he was dominating and he won 9 races in a row in 2013, and people were just thinking oh, this is boring. Yeah, he's only winning because it's the best car. It's the same thing. As soon as someone dominates, all the same things come out. But like you say, we just want to see close racing. I think everyone wants to see that, because Formula One's a unique sport, I feel, compared to football. I know you've already got a football analogy in, and that's a good welcome to the podcast, because we always seem to get one in. But football, you kind of support a team maybe a bit more. This is maybe talking from a personal perspective, but I like Max Verstappen, but if Nicholas Latifi was closing him down for a race victory, I'd probably want Nicholas Latifi to win, because it's a better story. And I think there's a lot of Formula One fans like myself where you want an underdog win. You want excitement in the sport, and that comes over your own driver, maybe.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I agree. It's that kind of, you're gonna get some people, like I'm the same as you. I'm very much neutral and all. There's certain drivers and certain teams I'll kind of pull for a bit more, but yeah, it's all about the story. I mean, we all wanted to see, and Matty was saying this as well, like everyone wanted to see Nico on that podium, regardless of who that would displace. If that had displaced Max, if that had displaced Alex, my favourite driver, like that's we all wanted to see Nico do well because of the story, like you said.
You mentioned about Max, and you're right. I was surprised as anyone when I heard he was second in the title. Devolia Esp says, do you think Max is a serious title contender? If Hamilton's engine was to fail, Max would almost be on the same amount of points as Lewis. I'm not sure whether this is just... We've seen it before. I think it was 2018 where Danny Rick won a couple of races when Mercedes was struggling, and then everyone goes, oh, maybe this could be Ricciardo's year. And Formula One is very fickle when it comes to only as good as your last race, with rating drivers and things. So I don't know. Are we hyping Max up too much that he could be in a title? But then you'd argue that Red Bull get better towards the end of the season. So what do you reckon? Do you reckon he's in the hunt, or is it wishful thinking?
I think he's got it in him, Max, for sure. No question, no shadow of doubt. Max has definitely got it in him, ability-wise, but it's that Mercedes is just levels. That Mercedes is an absolute monster, and with a bit of good because that was the thing. It was a good strategy call from Red Bull, and Mercedes' own issues with blistering. It wasn't a, if Mercedes weren't having the problems that they were yesterday, Max wouldn't have been anywhere near. I don't think. If they weren't having the fundamental issues with the tyres that they were having. And, Red Bull have got to rely on and they took the opportunity, when Mercedes did struggle, and Red Bull need to continue to do that. I still think this is Max's best chance, because I think he's the most complete a driver he has been since he started in F1. Because you got to remember when Max first came in and all the Crashtappen memes, and he was a bit wild. Me. I was going to say, like, I feel that he's really matured as a driver. He's still aggressive, but I think he's got that right balance now. And I think he's in the best position in himself to win. And I just think Red Bull, they've probably got the best pit crew. There's a lot of elements of that team who I think are even better than Mercedes. And I think, if you stuck Max alongside Lewis, I mean, he would challenge Lewis right to the very end. I really do think those two are on another level. But all in all, yeah, it's going to be tough. I mean, my predictions that I did at the start of this year, I did say Max, I think, is going to win the driver's title. I think this is his best chance, and I do still think that, because did he get a DNF? Was it a DNF in Austria? So
he did. That was going to be my next point. That I still, when that first happened, me and Matt on the podcast, I'm sure we said that's Max out the title with how good the Mercedes are. Even though it seemed ridiculous to say that after one race, you think Mercedes are so far. I mean, look at them in qualifying; they're always 8/10 clear of Verstappen, and then it's just whoever's further down. That race arguably could have played out very similar. It's all speculation, but it could have played out very similar to Silverstone, because he was on the alternate strategy, wasn't he? And we were kind of robbed of that race where he retired within, 4 laps or something?
Yeah,
very early in the race. We didn't get to see really any of it. And, it's all hindsight, but if he had won that race, that's 25 points, and he's maybe looking at 10 points behind Hamilton in the title, then maybe it would be looking very different. But I think you're right that it's almost like Mercedes have to lose a race for him to win it than him actually have a car that's capable of beating them. And
Absolutely.
we can't shy away from the fact that the Mercedes tyres were so awful on their tyres. That's really why Max was allowed to beat them for a change.
It was blowing my mind how blistered they were getting after like a few laps. It was insane.
Well, Max was pulling away on the same tyre, wasn't he?
Yeah, and Max is just. I'd eat my dinner off them. They looked beautifully smooth, and it was crazy. It was mad how different those two cars were treating their tyres. And again, like hopefully, like you say about changing the tyre rules with Q2, that adding more strategy gives more of a chance for an upset, I think, and that's what we want to see.
Okay, so let's move on to Mercedes then, as we were talking about their kind of woes. And Pesi Ruska says, did Bottas get screwed over by Mercedes? Now, I didn't actually read too much into this, but I've seen from what I've heard online that Bottas was a little bit critical maybe, or maybe just a little bit annoyed about, which is maybe understandable with starting on pole and wondering how the race got away from him, because one of my first takeaways from that race was how on earth has Lewis Hamilton still finished ahead of Bottas when Bottas started from pole, still led into the first corner, had the optimum strategy with being the first person to pit, which we know is the optimum strategy. And it seems crazy that Hamilton was the one struggling way more on his tyres and was dropping 4 or 5 seconds behind Bottas at one point when they were really struggling with the hards. He got first call, but for me it comes back to our point about winning it on the pit wall and all these, when you want to see the drivers take it into their own hands. Lewis took a gamble. Mercedes took a gamble with leaving him out. And it is funny that sometimes, despite all the computers saying this is the perfect strategy, Bottas got preferential strategy with everything. Mercedes took a risk, and it actually ended up being better. And you could argue if there was maybe a few more laps, I don't know, maybe Hamilton would have even got behind Verstappen at the end. So his strategy ended up playing a lot better. So do you feel like Bottas is justified kind of saying these things?
I'm not one for like conspiracy theories and looking too deep into these things, but I do think that Mercedes Mercedes are taking Verstappen's challenge seriously for sure. Like they'd be naive not to, and like we say, Verstappen's now second in the drivers' title championship, and I just think like Mercedes can play that where they kind of try and make Valtteri feel that they're not giving Lewis priority treatment. But I just feel like Mercedes definitely want Lewis to get that 7th World Drivers title. They definitely want him to, take all these records, because that will be a reflection on them as well in the history books going forward. And yes, they support Bottas, but also Bottas doesn't have, for me, it's a combination of factors. I definitely think Mercedes do give Lewis preferential treatment, and I think that's very justifiable and understandable why. And I think that is the situation that Bottas has kind of signed up to.
He lacks a bit of mojo, doesn't he? However much people hate maybe a Verstappen, there's at least something there, because maybe it's kind of Formula One, isn't it, where all the best drivers, you can maybe judge this in a lot of things in life, that how successful you are, the more people hate you. And I don't think there are many people that really hate Bottas. He's not like one where people really dislike him, but part of that, like you say, he's not like a fiery character or anything. I feel.
But Bottas doesn't get. Bottas is a very talented bloke, particularly I think over one lap. I think he's proven it, because he has. Lewis doesn't dominate in terms of pole positions. Yes, he probably gets a slight majority over Valtteri, but all in all, they're pretty close over one lap. But you look at like a Nico Rosberg, for me, he was on a different level to Valtteri, because Nico really did push and really didn't allow that second driver role to consume him, as much as Lewis had the measure of him over most of their time together. And arguably Nico was lucky to get that 2016 title because of the technical difficulties that Lewis had, but still I just think he pushed Lewis so much further. And I think Mercedes see that. They see that again, the long term, having the matching Michael's record in terms of drivers' titles, taking all these records, first black guy to do so. And I think that is going to be a big deal to Mercedes as well. And I do think that kind of factors into the strategy. But of course, don't get me wrong, I've said it before, I say it again, I think Lewis is the greatest of all time. He's an incredible driver. He's got an amazing team behind him. It's going to take a lot for Valtteri to get anywhere near, let alone Max.
There was a damning stat going around that it's now Verstappen has matched Bottas's win record since 2017, when you could argue that Mercedes have been maybe not as dominant as they were in the kind of 2014, 15, 16 era, but certainly have had at least the best car for the last 3 and a bit seasons. So, it's funny you mentioned conspiracy theories and sabotage. Sebastian Vettel, question here from trying to be nice _ 1, what has happened to Vettel? 2, do you think Binotto's Ferrari is giving Charles priority? And 3, do you think Vettel's separation from Ferrari is going to get ugly? Now, I kind of will shamefully sit on the fence massively over this and say that it is very much both parties for me. I totally agree with you, actually, that I'm the same. I absolutely despise hearing that people think that a team would sabotage their own car. It is absolutely baffling, and everyone is desperate, and we'll go into this later because there's obviously some Hulkenberg business as well, which is similar. But a team would not sabotage their own car, and you're right. Mercedes prioritize Hamilton over Bottas in terms of, they get an equal car, but there's no denying that Hamilton has had somewhat preferential treatment. It's the same with Verstappen in Red Bull, and it's the same with Leclerc in Ferrari at the moment, particularly.
It's the same with Schumacher at Ferrari against Barrichello. It's always been a thing.
And they do it for a reason, right? They do it for a reason because that's who they're putting their faith in. And Vettel's going, I think he was. They've not handled it well, either side. There was some very damning radio from Vettel where he was saying, what was it? You've got it wrong. Yeah. He was absolutely slating the strategy, which, to be fair to him, they put him on, was it the hards for about 10 laps and then the mediums for 20, and he was going, why would you do that? And apparently there's talk that it was because it was to get him out of the way of Charles, I think, which really does show that he's just... Ferrari have checked him out because he has checked out with them because he not slated them, but over radio was kind of, you could tell he wasn't happy with them. And then Binotto comes out in the press and says, well, Vettel's spin didn't help. So the two of them are really, it's an awful relationship. And I heard a team radio as well after the race where you normally have, even if they've not had a bad race, they go kind of like, thank you guys, it's P12, okay, we'll go on to the next one. And he was just silent.
Silence. Absolutely.
You heard that
that's
as well,
the second time that's happened as well. I think it was, I can't remember if it was last week or the week before, just silence. His engineer had to do a radio check to make sure Seb was actually still there.
Wow. Yeah, it says it all. It's a very awkward relationship. And we'll just jump on to this next question about it, because Andy North says, given how unhappy Sebastian clearly is with Ferrari, do you think he'll see the season out? Because I would have laughed this question off maybe 3 races ago, but how it went, how it's going now, and he's obviously been seen leaving with Racing Point even when he's been leaving the circuit. It is very sour, and it's to the point where I could see it happening. I don't know about you.
I mean, obviously, it's more like I could see 100%. I think Seb doesn't want to be there, and I don't think Ferrari want him there. But it's the chain of events. So if Seb was to jump out early, would he then take that Racing Point seat for the rest of the year? And then how would that knock-on effect? You know what I mean? Like it's more that chain that I feel that would get in the way of him leaving early. But I don't know. What do people think? Like, I don't know.
I kind of you're right. Because any normal circumstances, I could see, okay, this could happen. But because they've got Carlos in place, who wouldn't want to leave McLaren, you wouldn't think early for his contract, how would that play out? It's almost like it's an absolute disaster for both parties, but they just need to wait for the divorce, I guess.
You've got, so it'd be Vettel to Racing Point, and then we don't know whether it'll be Lance or Sergio. I mean, I heard an interesting interview on Ziggo Sport, the Dutch channel, talking to Lance, and literally because they don't care, they just ask the questions. I love it. Great. And Lance was actually quite kind of, he was like, oh well, if I lose my seat, then these things happen. Like, he wasn't as confident as you'd expect the owner's son to be, if you know what I mean. So it could still be Stroll leaving, but we don't know. But like you say, again, it's science. Then it's Ricciardo to Renault, then it's Alonso. Like there's all this chain. It's like when you buy a house and there's a chain, and it's like it takes it all has to work in continuity for things to. And I don't see how that would work in terms of, like, if they got rid of him early, they're not going to get science in. So who would they get in as that?
Well, the only person I can think of would be Kimi back, but would that even work? Like, would they get Kimi back just to do
who's got the
final six races, and then who gets the Alpha seat? It gives huge knock-on effects. I mean, who are the Ferrari reserves? I know we had a lot of talk about the Mercedes reserves being Gutierrez and Van Dorn. Kvyat used to be
Fairline,
it's not he? Brendan Hartley, is it still?
Oh, it's Giovinazzi's kind of top of the
list. Because it's almost like, because they've got that almost Toro Rosso Red Bull relationship with Alpha, their young driver is already in there, and they've already obviously promoted Leclerc, so I'm not 100% sure.
It says so Giovinazzi would be number one, but again, that's obviously vacating an Alpha seat. And then Pascal Wehrlein is a sim driver, so
Wehrlein, okay, I remember that.
So I guess maybe him.
All right.
But it's the chain of connection. But I don't know, man. Like Seb's situation, I know you say like you're sat on the fence, and I think that is, to be fair, it is, both parties are, I feel, pretty both at fault. I mean, I did a little poll on Twitter yesterday, asking like, who do people think's most at fault, and I think only 10% of people said Seb's most at fault, and then the rest was pretty much evenly split between just Ferrari or both Seb and Ferrari. And I think he's only human. That's the thing. And like in any job, if you know you haven't got the support of the people around you, that's going to have an effect on the way you perform. And it's like a self-fulfilling. Seb makes a mistake, Ferrari get on him. And it's a
vicious cycle, isn't it?
It is a vicious cycle, man. And I'm no wonder. And I think just Seb needs to get out of that team. I think Racing Point, Aston Martin, whatever, would be great for him, because I'd love to see him actually not in a Ferrari and in a more stable car, hopefully, because the mistakes, you can't ignore the mistakes that Seb's been making over the last kind of 2 seasons at least. It's impossible to say for sure how much that's the team and how much that's him. He's the one behind the wheel, yes. But obviously, as we know with Max spinning out at Hungary, if a car's balance isn't working for you, you can make silly errors. Ricciardo spun as well yesterday. So it's, he's not infallible. It just, when it rains, it pours. And Seb's not having a good time at the minute.
He is not. Nico Hulkenberg, we'll have a quick chat about him, because it might even be the last time we speak about him for a while. So Eric Gage says, another conspiracy theory. Why did Racing Point pit Hulkenberg? Now, I saw the tweet from Racing Point. They tweeted afterwards and said it was a vibration, right? Yeah. Vibration on the tyre. So they had to pit him right near the end, just so his tyre didn't
make it. Yeah,
you thought he wouldn't make it, and it blew up. Now, Hulkenberg in the interview afterwards sounded confused by it, and he didn't really understand why they'd done it. Now, obviously, there's loads of telemetry, but Twitter being Twitter, the first thing everyone thinks is that Lance Stroll, being the son of the team owner, and I think someone tweeted them it, and they replied saying, "Last time we checked, Lawrence Stroll isn't our strategist." So, I mean, fair play to them for calling it out. And I don't know about you. I'm sure you're a bit of a Stroll fan, aren't you? Anyway, so, but you don't mind a bit of Stroll.
I think he gets more. I don't think he deserves the stick he gets. Let's just say.
Yeah, but I think this theory is absolutely bollocks. And again, it goes back to, why would a team sabotage their own car?
Yeah.
Because if anything, they would have just asked Hulkenberg to back off and swap positions, and they could have even justified it. And while they would have got a bit of backlash, they could have said, well, Stroll's the one that's actually getting World Championship driver points, and when Perez is back, you won't. So we appreciate you doing this. You've driven a brilliant race, but this is the team's decision. And yes, they'd get a bit of backlash, but why would they sacrifice a position to Albon just to make Lance happy? And it's absolutely ridiculous.
It's so tight in that midfield now that Ferrari have almost fallen into that midfield. Like you say, you can. People won't like it, but you can rationalise that completely. But like you say about sabotage, there's a difference between sabotage and prioritising. Clearly Ferrari are prioritising Charles, and it makes sense. Like, if I was a massive Sebastian Vettel fan, I wouldn't be happy about it, but I would understand it, because Ferrari's priority is Ferrari. Ferrari will hopefully be in this sport for years and years and years and years to come. Drivers change all the time. Again,
he's the one. Charles is the one with a 5-year contract.
Yeah, well, exactly. That's the thing, because and even then, like, it's still, in 20 years' time, Charles probably won't be in that seat. And it's like, again, like with football teams, like, the club remains the same. The players are changing all the time, but the team needs to prioritise what's best for them in the short and long term. And obviously, like, Ferrari like money, just like anyone else. They want to be top of the midfield now. They want to be third in the constructors. So they're going to do what they can to make sure that happens. And I don't know, man. I think it's, like you say, like, it's frustrating, because I get where people are coming from with it. But again, sabotage just doesn't do anyone any favours, because then you're just sacrificing championship points for no good reason. But one thing, actually, I was going to ask you, because you're such a fountain of knowledge. Are Nico's points still going to count towards the constructors? Because I know they don't get given to Sergio.
Yeah, they do.
They will still accrue those constructors' points. So from that point of view, it's like, well,
so
actually,
there's no reason.
No, the team's not losing out. But obviously, with Lance, I don't know. Do you think he'll keep that seat? Because I don't know, man. It's strange.
Lance?
Yeah, do you think Lance will?
I think it would be Vettel and Stroll, yeah. But I've said before, I don't think it's unquestionable that they'd get rid of Stroll and keep Perez.
Yeah.
It's a toughie. It is a toughie, because you look at the form now and you'd say, why would they go for Vettel? But I think Vettel would be absolutely born again in a new team, and we'd get the old Seb back. And, you're not, regardless of what you think about Vettel as a driver, when he was in the Red Bull, he's not. He didn't just win in the Red Bull because he had the fastest car. You don't win 4 world titles and win 9 races in a row and absolutely dominate a sport for 4 years because you're a bad driver. So you can see why they would pick Vettel over Perez, even with it. And Stroll's a future talent as well. Maybe he's got into the sport a little too early. And I do agree with you to a point that he doesn't deserve the criticism he gets as much. People make it sound like he's literally been bought a seat when he's a F3 champion. I say it so many times on this podcast. You don't get into Formula One by just buying a seat. I mean, you could in the 1960s, but you can't now.
Last time I checked, a £20 note can't drive a Formula One car, and it's like he's not a Ragunathan. Like, yes,
exactly.
He got opportunities. Like, all drivers get opportunities, and at different stages. And obviously, having his dad in the position he is, he got all the opportunities and everything. But he's still only 21. He's the second youngest driver on the grid. So I think given time, and I think given Stroll's progression, It might take a bit longer, and yes, his money will help give him more opportunities, because there's been a lot of great drivers. Well, Antonio Felix da Costa, who won Formula E. There's a lot of talk of him, maybe getting dropped too soon, and it's like if he'd have had the support that Stroll had, he probably would still be in F1 and would have been able to mature in the sport. But ultimately, you can't I'm sorry, but if any of us were in that position, we'd take this. There's nothing more.
Yeah, you can't begrudge.
Yeah,
son, do you want to drive a Formula One car? Yes.
He was born into that money and that support, and you know what? Fair play to him.
It's a weird one, because it's no doubt helped his career, but it's also a burden for your popularity. Regardless of how well you do, they will always have that kind of negative. Absolutely. I mean, the guy got a podium in a Williams, so he can't be that bad.
Now it's time for WTF1.
I'm going to just start in the normal order. So, Lewis Hamilton. What are we giving Lewis?
Shall I go first with these?
Yeah, and then we'll argue away.
So I'm going to say Lewis Hamilton. I'm going to say B.
B. Yeah, I've got B on my sheet as well. And Bottas, I think a B as well. It's hard to separate them, because no doubt, you've got to give Bottas credit for out-qualifying him. It wasn't really his fault that Hamilton still ended up ahead with a strategy gamble. But, he wasn't beaten into the first corner.
Yeah.
But Mercedes, they didn't drive badly. They had nothing, did they?
No.
And it really shows that second and third is a bad result for them. It really shows how dominant they've been. Double podium.
That's the thing, because again, it's like reflection on their performance, and like you say, Bottas kind of, that strategy was out of his hands, that was out of his control. So I think, and he kept that gap consistent to Lewis at the start of the race, if not kind of grew it a little bit. So his pace was very good about Valtteri, but stiffed on the old strategy, unfortunately for him.
Nice. Right, Ferrari, Leclerc and Vettel. I mean, Leclerc, for me, I don't see how it can't be an A-star. It's pretty much nothing more he could have done. He did a one-stop as well, which is unbelievable. I mean, don't get me wrong. We've mentioned it earlier that, yes, they are prioritising Charles Leclerc, but you cannot deny that was an amazing drive to get that result.
Yeah, I think the only caveat, I'd probably say A, but the only reason is just because his qualifying wasn't amazing. And again, obviously,
where did he qualify?
I think he was P8. I think he was P8 in quali, because he was ahead of Alex, but he was behind, obviously, Nico, Stroll. He was behind Ricciardo. So I think that is the only kind of slight blemish, but he did obviously bring it through in the race, and that's what matters. So I would say I think I'm more. I'll give it to you. Oh, come on, you're the founder, so you get final word. Okay,
right. We're going A-star for Charles Leclerc, and then Sebastian Vettel. It's got to be, he no doubt is not very happy with his team, but spinning at the first corner is his own fault at the end of the day. So he compromised the strategy from the start, even if his strategy was ridiculous, and he just became to the point where the team don't even want him to get a point. They'd rather him just get out of the way of Charles, which is a little bit awkward. But I think it's got to be a D.
Yeah, I think D. I think like you say, it's I think that race perfectly kind of summarised the relationship. Seb makes an error, and Ferrari take an L on strategy, and Seb made that mistake, and he's got to take responsibility for that as well. But obviously, Ferrari have to take responsibility for giving him a car that just isn't working for him, and their pace is well off. So I think D's perfect.
Cool. Right, Red Bull, Max Verstappen. Any argument in A-star for Max Verstappen? We give him A lot of the time.
Got to be A-star.
We've spoken about him a lot, so let's just move on. A-star. Alex Albon is an interesting one. What's your thoughts on this? You're a bit of a you like.
Alex is my favourite driver. Yeah, I love Alex.
Okay.
Obviously it's been I'm a West Ham fan, and I'm an Alex Albon fan, so I don't make it easy for myself. But so obviously his qualifying is still off where it should be. I think there's no smoke without fire, and he's going through a very similar. Although I do think Alex's results have been better than Pierre's were. Like, that's a fact. They have been. Obviously, Ferrari haven't been anywhere near as much of a challenge as they were last year, so that's a fair point as well. But the way Pierre's kind of kicked on and doing an amazing job in that AlphaTauri, and yet, that Red Bull time for him wasn't a reflection of his ability. And obviously, now it's happening again to an extent with Alex. Although Alex's racecraft, I do think, has been very good. Yes, he's made some mistakes, of course. But all in all, like, I think in the race, I don't see he could have really done much more. I think his race was very, very good. But where his qualifying is still very poor. And particularly in these cars, in this generation, overtaking is always going to be difficult. You don't think of Silverstone as a hard place to overtake, yet there were DRS trains left, right and centre. So Alex really does need to step it up in quali. I'm confident he will, given the time, but I think in the race, I would give him a B. For me.
Yeah, see, ABCDEF1, we normally give it's about their weekend, but obviously race takes priority. Alex Albon is an interesting one for me because a surprising amount of people said that he was driver of the day. Now, I don't know if that... I mean, let's be honest, we love an overtake. We were talking about it with Max Verstappen. That's why we like him, that he's a racer. And Alex no doubt provided the most entertainment. His moves around the outside of Copse were incredible. But I don't know if it's a little bit patronising to say that a driver that finished fifth when his teammate won the race is driver of the day. Maybe that's harsh to Alex Albon, even though you think you're being nice to him, if that makes any sense. So I think Albon is worthy of a C just because his qualifying. He really needs to step up his qualifying, but I don't know. Like his moves are so much better than what Gasly was doing in that Red Bull. He have? I guess his first. Did he pit on lap 1 or something? He was
he pitted really early. It wasn't
it?
quite like he was the first driver to come in, and then kind of Pierre
really
came
early,
in just after him. But I think realistically, even if Alex had qualified P5, say for example, or P4, I don't think he'd have beaten those Mercedes because I just think that. So I think the best Alex could have hoped for was P4.
Was fourth, yeah.
So to get P5, I think
he was fit. Yeah, he was fifth. To be honest, I'm thinking. Yeah, I thought he was behind the racing points, but no, he beat them both. So
and he would have.
Yeah, it's a good recovery.
With the pace difference, I think he would have caught Hulkenberg regardless. If Hulkenberg hadn't, because he was catching them at a rate of knots towards the end, and obviously got past Stroll. Probably would have got Nico as well. So yeah, I think B for me. I'm
looking down the list, and actually, to be fair, some of the people that I've given my opinions of a C, he did better. So I'm happy to go B. Let's give Alex Albon a B.
Come on, Alex. Yes.
Carlos Sainz, weirdly anonymous in the race. Don't really remember him doing anything. He was bad quali out in Q2. I think this was probably Sainz's worst, correct me if I'm wrong, performance in a McLaren, especially when he was probably the standout driver last year. I think he's got to be a D for Carlos. It was really out of character.
Yeah, he had a poor pit stop, which obviously wasn't any fault of his own. But yeah, exactly. You can't catch a break with him. It's like P13 in qualifying. Obviously, the McLaren was off the pace. Lando only squeezed through, but I feel like Lando's really kind of, making McLaren think, oh, actually, yeah, we've definitely come out best of this deal because I think Lando's really finding his feet now, and Carlos, it was a very forgettable race, like you say. So I think D's completely fair.
And then Lando C. I think he wasn't amazing, but it's not a great result. But it wasn't as bad as Sainz, right?
I seem to have read something. I don't know if someone just said on Twitter that apparently quoting Lando saying that first stint was the worst of his career in his own words.
Yeah.
So obviously, but to get home in the points, I think all things considered, I think C.
C, bit of average.
Yeah.
Right, so Daniel Ricciardo, not the greatest result. He did very well in qualifying. He was fifth. However, he finished the race 14th. and had a bit of a spin, which he actually referred to as a Seb spin, which is a bit savage.
Harsh, but that's the thing. I think he had a really strong quali, and because his spin was so much later in the race, he didn't have time to recover like Seb was able to. Because
okay, fair.
Which I'd say that qualifying definitely deserves recognition, but obviously with the spin, I think it's
a costly mistake.
I think C,
it's like a C minus D area.
Yeah.
I mean, to be fair, he was a lap down. He finished behind Carlos. I'm going to overrule and give him a D because he's 14th is not the one. They were looking really quick after free practice, weren't they?
It's not a reflection of their pace, but then their race pace, I don't know. Their race pace was okay, but it wasn't amazing.
Yeah. Ocon, though, he really shone. Only person other than Charles to do a one stop. Poor qualifying, but good in the race. It's got to be a B, I think.
Yeah, I think B. I was thinking B. Where did he finish? Was it 7th?
He finished 8th, so he was.
Okay. I think B.
Finished. Yeah, it's impressive to be able to do a one stop, but I do think while it was impressive, there's more pace in that Renault, and I think you could argue that. If Ricciardo didn't have a spin, maybe he'd have finished ahead. So I don't think he overperformed the Renault. He just had a much more solid race that we kind of expected him to do.
Yeah, and it is still his first year back, and I think yes, I know he's not a complete rookie, but give him a bit of credit. So yeah, I think B's fair.
Cool. Gasly is a difficult one for me because he was absolutely superb in qualifying.
Yeah,
and
he kind of fell away, didn't he?
But fell away. He finished 11th, so missed out on the points.
Behind Kvyat.
C.
I don't know, man.
Is that too harsh because of how good his qualifying was? But then the race, he was not anywhere in the race.
I don't know how much of his falling down the order was down to him and strategy. So
it makes it difficult to grade him sometimes.
And he done such a good job in quali. I think I'm going B. I really think B. Honestly, I think Pierre's been my driver of the season so far. He's been so good.
Well,
he's extracting he's doing in that AlphaTauri what Max is doing in the Red Bull. He's extracting everything out of that car, and is consistently. Yes, I know he ended up lower than Kvyat on the final race results, but I'm saying B for Pierre. But
cool. All right, I'm happy with that. Let's go to Kvyat, and we don't really talk about him much, and it was one of the performances of the race, I think, up there with Verstappen and Leclerc. So I think it's got to be an A for Kvyat because he started
right down the
16th and
he was out
got
in
into
Q3.
The points.
He was out in he was out in Q1 though. So
it was a lap time deleted though, wasn't it? Which I guess is his own fault.
He damaged his floor on that new bit of curb. Yeah. Because he said he thought he damaged the floor because he went over that. In quali everyone was kicking up sparks, and that's where Seb ripped a hole in the bottom of his car. But I'm pretty sure. So I don't know. Because of his poor Q1, I would probably err towards B personally. But I understand where you're coming from, so I will concede the A.
It's funny that it's so hard to get these accurate, and people will definitely, driver ratings are always hard, especially when you don't have onboard cameras to analyze every single person's race. But Kvyat doesn't get a lot of love on this podcast, so I'm going to give him an A because I think he drove a really good race, and we should applaud him for that.
Yeah, and also last week his tyre blowout was because of an overheating rim, I think. I seem to read that. So that wasn't his fault either, and he was had really good pace last week as well. So yeah, fair play, Kvyat.
Nice. Right, let's go for Hulkenberg and Stroll quickly. Mentioned them before. Stroll B, Hulkenberg maybe higher, an A because of his unbelievable qualifying, and
A.
just how, yeah, I mean, you'd argue that getting into a car mid-season is never easy, so
no,
it's got to be
especially
an A, right?
like around a track like Silverstone, which is so quick and so heavy on his neck, like to come in, put it P3 in quali, and then on pace he should have been, you know, if it wasn't for that vibration, he'd have finished what, P5. So yeah, I 100% for Nico, and I want to see him back on the grid next year, man, because he's proven he's still got it. He
has. I was proven wrong, actually. I'm not too proud to admit that I kind of wrote Hulkenberg off a bit, thinking he's had his chance, he's bottled many podiums, but for him to come back and stick it in P3 after having barely any practice, and yeah, it was so impressive. So fair play to him. Hopefully not the last time we see him in F1. Kimi Räikkönen and Giovinazzi, speaking of difficult people to rate, the Alphas are just so difficult because it's so hard to know where they even were. Kimi, a B, because he was 15th and finished ahead of a Haas, and Giovinazzi gets a C, maybe. What was he? Because he beat the Williams. I mean, that's Haas, Alpha, and Williams. Last year, it was really hard to rate the Williams because they were nowhere. This year, we've got 3 teams where it's just really difficult. So, happy to just go with B and C.
Yeah. I don't have a strong opinion, to be honest, because
I know it's difficult.
It's hard to, because you never see him during the race. You don't know how much of it's a reflection of, like you say, that it's like Williams have come up, and then Alpha and Haas have kind of come down, and now they're all kind of on a level, which is, I guess it's nice to see them battling at the bottom, I guess. But yeah, it's hard to get excited about it, isn't it?
Yeah. And we'll go with Grosjean, which is the same. I think it's a C because he's not.
He qualified quite
anything
well.
Particularly special. Qualified. How did he do in qualifying?
I think.
So I think wow! Yeah, it was 14th.
Yeah, he qualified quite well. So I think he deserves a better rating than K-Mag, definitely, and obviously Magnussen.
I think we're going to give K-Mag a D though, because he had. We've not even spoken about this. Did you hear the reason for his DNF was that he ran out of tyres, which is pretty mad.
No, I didn't hear that. That's
okay. Yeah, so he pitted at the end. He went through his tyres too quickly, and then he came into the pits. And although Haas said that they retired because of a problem with the car, in the interviews afterwards, Magnussen said that they ran out of tyres. They are obviously, if you don't know this, they're allocated a certain number of tyres before the weekend, and Magnussen was coming in. Don't quote me on the exact tyre. It was something like he had a lot of laps left, and he could have put the softs on, but they would have just shredded anyway. So they just decided to just park it because he wasn't getting points anyway, which is a very, very odd situation.
That's mad. Is that more of a Haas strategy call than Kev though? I don't know.
Probably,
I feel like that's more in the team's like remit, because Kev's focusing on the driving.
Yeah, although he's got to be worse than Grosjean, because like you say, Grosjean was 13th in quali and Magnussen was 17th. Yeah. He was struggling, he said, with the car's been unpredictable since the Albon crash, because obviously they had to turn it around very quick. Okay, so D for Magnussen, and then lastly, Russell and Latifi, just C for both. I feel like maybe Russell deserves more because
Russell got out of Q1, so
which is how on earth his average qualifying position for the year is 14th. I think there was a stat going around, which is mad for a Williams when he was just kind of destined for the back row every race. What do you reckon? C for both, or B for Russell and C for Latifi? It's
maybe B for Russell just because of quali.
Yeah, okay. Tips over. Just a B, I'd say, because it's not. It wasn't exactly a stellar drive from him. Okay, let's get into the predictions, because I am absolutely boiling now.
Same, mate.
I'm looking like
roasting
a soft Pirelli tyre right now. 70th anniversary Grand Prix predictions. Matt said Hulkenberg DNF, no. And Vettel out the points, yes. So he gets a point. I said Sainz fourth, absolutely nowhere near.
No, minus, surely. Come on.
Yeah, that's awful. And I thought that Pirelli were going to bottle the soft tyres, but I've never been more happy not to get a point. So there you go. Fans said Baldy Mark 05 said 3-stop strategies, and I think only Hulkenberg did a 3-stop.
Yeah.
So I will give you nothing for the plural.
Soz.
We're that harsh. No Mercedes on the podium from RSU official. That is bold and didn't happen. Right, Spanish GP predictions. Matt has gone for... I wanted to call him out on this, so maybe we can do it together and just bully him because he probably won't be watching. Matt went for Verstappen challenges Mercedes again. It's like, is that a prediction? Like, where's the cutoff point?
Well, he's their only
to this?
challenge,
Like,
isn't it?
Yeah. I mean, if he finishes third, is that a challenge, or does he have to be within a certain number of seconds?
No, I think it needs to be a genuine threat during the race.
He needs to make them think about their strategy and not be just checking they're hydrated and stuff. Albon P4.
I hope so.
Yeah,
I hope so.
Be nice.
That would be great.
I guess the theory behind that is that they're going to struggle. Maybe the Ferrari engines will struggle at Spain because they weren't great there in testing, were they? I have gone
might struggle in the heat as well. So.
Yeah, I've gone for a boring prediction, but maybe I'm going for the reverse jinx again of Mercedes 1-2, which with the hot weather you never know.
I mean, you're not really pushing the boat out that much, are you, Tommy? But still,
I haven't had points in a while, and I'm just
fair enough. Yeah,
points on the board. So I've got a little bit more bold with this one, and Hulkenberg will race again. So obviously we don't know the situation with Perez. He is 99% confident, according to himself, that he will race. However, I can see Hulkenberg racing. What do you reckon on that?
Well, so
you don't have any predictions.
I saw that article, and it's so was that quoting Sergio? Or was that I just assumed that was quoting
I can't
the team,
remember who
the
it
team
was
being
that said
99% sure. But either way,
okay.
I mean, we'd love. I don't know. Maybe it was Perez, but we'd love to see it, of course. Because I think Nico's really putting himself in the shop window with that performance at Silverstone. But I mean, I don't know, because they've got F1 need to take a really serious stance on this, because it is a serious situation, and if they do try and get Sergio back for a bit of a loophole, that's not going to reflect well on the sport, I don't think. And they've got a very capable driver in terms of Hulkenberg, so I don't think. Yes, I think Perez would get more out of the car, but I don't think Racing Point should be pushing too hard to get Sergio back if it's not completely A-OK.
Although if you hear paddock rumours, they are pushing for him to get back because they don't want to replace him as their driver while he's sat in quarantine. So we shall see. Fans then for the Spanish Grand Prix have gone for Ben's vacation, says Russell Q3. That is bold, and I mean you'd love to see it, wouldn't you? And JP Rock _ a Ferrari out in Q1. I feel like that is more likely to happen.
Yes,
we
absolutely.
shall see.
Absolutely.
I feel like Ferrari are going to have a tough time in Spain.
Yeah, because it's a very power-heavy track as well. So,
and I think it was. So obviously they're pre-season testing there, and that's when all the rumours came out that.
Yeah.
Hang on a minute, these are behind Racing Point or even McLaren. So, yeah.
And it's so difficult to overtake as well. I can't see the Ferraris qualifying that well, and because Catalonia is so difficult to overtake because that bloody last chicane, it's just it's going to be a long season for Ferrari fans. I do not envy you.
It's funny you mentioned that last chicane because you've just jogged my memory of a prediction that I didn't put in because it was too flaky and we could just rig it for it to happen. But someone's prediction was that I would spend the whole of the next podcast talking about the final chicane and how bad it is. So we shall see. That probably will happen because we mention it every year how terrible it is, and you just mentioned it now. So, yeah, fingers crossed. Spain is good. It's not normally the best race, is it? But let's hope some with the heat.
Hopefully the heat will mix things up
what we
again,
can hope for. Cool. All right. Thank you very much for being our Nico Hulkenberg and joining last minute. You smashed it just like Nico Hulkenberg, so well done.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure, mate. Been an absolute pleasure.
And yeah, hopefully me presenting wasn't too awful, because it's certainly not in my comfort zone, but hopefully it was still an enjoyable podcast. Thank you very much, Tommo, for joining. Hopefully it won't be the last time. And
Fingers crossed.
Let's wave. You have to
Oh
look
yeah, I don't know which way I've got to wave.
Yeah, I don't know.
I'm going to wave
both ways because it will work on the edit. Cool. Cheers, guys. Bye.
Bye.